Good morning, good afternoon, good day. I'm here in Greenkill Gallery in Kingston, New York with David Gonzalez to have a conversation together. My name is Joanna Rotté, and I'm a lifelong maker of theater. And because of that, it brings me into conversation with David, who is a fellow traveler in the arts. I met David maybe 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, when I first moved from the Philadelphia area to the Hudson Valley. And I first saw him on stage performing. So it wasn't an introduction until after the performance. It was at a Christmas party in High Falls, and he was doing his own version of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." I think it's one of the first things I ever saw performed in the Hudson Valley, and I was completely joyfully elated with what I saw, because it was not only beautifully written and imaginative, but there in this Marbletown community center before a crowd of people who were just hanging out, having a party, he completely took the stage, took the space, controlled the situation, and was delightful. And I just had such admiration and appreciation for what he was able to do in that community setting. And also, I was moved by his generosity. Clearly, he was a professional, and here it was offhand. And giving that kind of gift to the community, which I think is a theme that I have come to learn that runs through David's work. I subsequently saw him as MC. I saw him in salon situations among friends. I saw him perform at Mohonk, and most recently, I've seen his performances on his website. He is a multifaceted, multidimensional, and solo performer. And what I just recently learned is he began his career as a music therapist. So I'd like David to join us now and talk about his origin story, how he came from music therapist to music performer and has spent a life integrating those careers. Oh, so David, I would love to hear about the beginning of your career. In particular, it seems like you started as a music therapist, and I believe you have a doctorate degree, so let's talk about that.
Well,
How did it begin? Okay.
How did it begin? Well, thank you for that lovely intro. How did it begin? It's always, where do you start, right? Where do you start the story?
Yeah.
It's an important thing. But I'll start it, since you mentioned music therapy, I'll start there. I started playing the guitar when I was 14 years old, which at that time felt like it was late. Like there are people at 14 who could really play, and I was just like, doo, doo, doo. But what music gave me was two really important things. It was a sanctuary, and it was a challenge. So sanctuary, because my family, there were lots of painful dynamics, and where I lived, it was generally pretty good, though it was a difficult place outside. I was subject to some violence and danger. It wasn't terrible, but it was enough to, like, I need some place to be safe, and at the same time I wanted a challenge. I didn't look for it, but it was there. So I started, listening and playing. And of course the idea was to become a professional musician, and that idea was like rock star, and so it was all this kind of like blah, blah, blah. And I went to college finally, and I actually didn't feel like I had the confidence and the chops to do it. So I thought I would become a teacher or something. Anyway, I did try to get into a conservatory and didn't like that. And then I went back to New York, and I enrolled at NYU, and there was a course on music therapy that summer. Right before that, I started volunteering at the infamous Willowbrook School in Staten Island, which is where Geraldo Rivera came in, this guerrilla journalism, and exposed the conditions at this Center for Disabled Adults. And I started volunteering there, and I was really confronted with human suffering at a mass scale I hadn't really seen before. And I brought my guitar, and I brought some tambourines and a maraca, and like just tried to do something. And my heart opened. And right after that, when I enrolled at NYU, there was a course in music therapy, and I went, and within an hour, I knew that that was my path. And that art form, that work, is really a combination of a musician and the idea of service. And it takes many different forms. My way in was through improvisation. And so, yes, I took that through an undergrad, master's, and a doctorate. And my work really focused on improvisation with children, with emotional issues, and with on the autism spectrum. So lots of one-to-one deep musical play. And the idea is to serve and to listen and to unfold a relationship in the dynamic of the music itself. There might be some conversation, but you could hear and feel change occurring in the music itself. And that's a conversation for another time. But within that work, I started telling stories to kids.
So then that seems like a performance career that is directed out towards an audience. I mean, then you started telling stories to children. So now we have a different, perhaps, motivation or a different reason for storytelling that isn't therapeutic?
Well, what happened was in the therapy context is when I started telling stories. Because I was exposed to Joseph Campbell and to Carl Jung and to Robert Johnson. And so I started diving in and exploring the curative power of story. And then I started volunteering just because I wanted to tell stories. And I started volunteering at schools and libraries just to because as a musician, I tend to be more interior. And as a storyteller, I'm more exterior, introvert and extrovert. If you hear my music, it tends to be whatever, more introverted. And on stage, I'm, a clown. I'm extrovert. So it was a whole other part of myself that came forward. So then I started, going to schools and libraries, and some agent heard about me and called me, and next thing you know, I was being booked, around.
So that's interesting. Where would you say was the beginning of professional career as a performer? Can you pinpoint?
I can absolutely pinpoint
Let's hear that.
So I'd been volunteering at these schools, and I was living in the East Village. Literally, the phone rang one day, and literally a guy said, "I'm looking for a storyteller for my roster. I heard you're good, kid." It was like this gruff voice. I was like, really? Anyway, literally the next day I went there, and this kind of crazy warehouse, office, and this guy behind the desk said, "Tell me a story, kid." And I was like, okay. So I told him a story, and the next thing, a week later, he got me a gig, and there were 200 kids and me. At that time, I would go barefoot and had all these colors on and blah, blah. But that day, I remember I was making $135 a week as a therapist. And in that gig, I made $150 telling stories to 300, 200 kids. And everybody was laughing. And I thought, I want more of this. The joy was palpable, and this sort of alignment with this extroverted personality that was there, but really hadn't really come into being. It was calling.
Well, I remember from an interview I watched that you gave to NPR that you said as a child, and it probably relates to this sanctuary you brought up before, you created and played with a puppet theater. So now we're here and you're telling story to kids. And is there a connection coming forward at all from that time in childhood where it was a haven?
Yeah.
It was, and therefore, what's the motivation? You said that money was better and there was joy,
no.
but what really takes you into that
Well, you
life?
just said the word haven. And when my Uncle Jose, who also made me my first guitar, made me a puppet theater, I would be happy to be not seen. There's something liberating in puppets where you could do anything because the face is hidden. It's a liberating space, you know. And so there was all kinds of dynamics in my life, divorce and pain and all the existential things of coming into consciousness as a being. And then my work with kids and really being intimate with their suffering, because these were kids who had real issues, troubles in their families, troubles in school. So safety, haven, refuge, but not falling asleep within that, but being sort of the curative power of being in a creative, intimate, safe space was important for me as a child, and it was important for me as a therapist, and that has been the through line to create sort of brave, safe spaces for the arts for kids. So that's been my mission, really. I mean, yeah.
You're multi-talented, David. You have the music therapist and teacher aspect of your talent, and you're a performer and writer and musician, and you can do mime, and you can move well, and you can sing. And this music has been important theme. It seems like a stream, an undying, undrying stream throughout your work. What does that do for you? And I want to say one thing. I loved what you said about interior with the music, and it reminds me of what you described in the puppet show, that you're not seen.
Mm-hmm.
But as a performer, you're very seen.
Right.
So let's talk about how the music nurtures your work and you.
Well, I love what you said is an undrying stream.
Okay.
I love that. Ellington famously said that music is his mistress. I would say it's the muse, because of course we have our muses in the exterior world, but the sound itself is a muse, an unending point of discovery and nourishment. And I was so fortunate to have teachers who guided me into that deep appreciation of sound as such. Clive Robbins, my music therapy teacher, and his wife Carol, and this the lineage of a deep engagement with the sound itself. Paul Nordhoff, we studied intervals, just listening to intervals.
Is that why your timing is so good?
Well, in music it's different. The intervals is different, but that's the rhythm side. Intervals here are like the space between one tone and another. And you listen to them, they have qualities. Really get into these qualities. Groove is a whole other thing, and flow, that's a whole other thing. And finally, music comes down to that relationship of tone and time and all its permutations. When we take tone or time out of music, it ceases to be music, for me. So, again, I was just so fortunate to have teachers and experiences that were integrative. It wasn't just like I'm studying this technique on the piano because I want. It was like, no, really feel this, really know what this is. And then I got into African dance and the whole embodiment. I studied African dance for 8 years quite seriously, and living in that ceremonial space of embodiment of the groove. So it's just always been there, and. Yeah, if I was yes, I'm a poet and I write and I act. If I was on a desert island and I can only take one thing, it would be music. It would be my guitar.
I saw you do a performance at Mohawk Mountain House, and there was a pianist accompanying you. And I saw clips from your shows, and there was maybe recorded music or live music or background music. It seems like it's indispensable. It's integral. And what would it be like not to have music in your mind? Why is it indispensable?
Wow. What would it be like to not have music? Wow.
There's many storytellers who don't have
Yeah,
that relationship
yeah.
to music.
I don't know. I don't have an easy answer for that because it's just so much there. It has to do with like flow. Flow. There's this great, I remember Bill Russell, great basketball player. You'd sort of like get into a zone where it wasn't about this or that or this. It was just being in this flow. And I remember reading that and relating to it. Because when, having played so much music and having such love and appreciation for it, that sense of flow is in all my aesthetics.
It is.
Is it beat by beat moving? Is it connected? Is it evolving in this sort of organic, integrated way? And whether I'm, reciting a poem with no music or whether I'm with a big band and we're doing it, everything, I feel accountable to that sense of flow that's embodied in the great music that we know. And for me, I could give you the list of all the great musicians who've inspired me, but that's my accountability. As a theater maker, I still feel accountable to musical artists as my, whether it's Bach or Stravinsky or Hendrix or Coltrane. There's a beat by beat sense of flow, committed. It's evolving with such integrity. So
The young people that you initially worked with and throughout your life have been members of your audiences. What do you like about them?
Oh man, well, it's this mix of innocence and openness. I kind of feel like my biggest job is to serve enchantment. To create experiences of enchantment and wonder, beyond everything. Because I think once I can convey that and bring that to a child, or facilitate an experience of wonder, that's the best I could do. And so I love getting feedback and the delight, the open eyes, the laughter, to have these pregnant silences and they're 6 years old in the sense of, it just, that lines up with mission, that's my mission, is this engaged sense of mutual engagement of wonder,
The world in which we live now is a threatening world. It's a difficult world. It's a worrisome world in terms of the future of these young people. So is this a way to take them alternatively to a different place? What do you want for these darlings?
Not a different place. Not a different place. One of my great teachers was Maxine Greene, who was a philosopher of aesthetics and educational reform through aesthetic awareness. She was at Teachers College at Columbia University, and Maxine had a beautiful construction. It's not the whole story, but it's a good part of it for me, and that Maxine made a direct connection between the ability to have an open, aesthetic, inquiring mind and the ability to be a fully functioning member of a healthy democracy. That when we have an inquisitive mind and we own it and we can inquire about our world from an honest place of engagement, we're less likely to be coerced and manipulated by powers that do not have our experience in mind for them, so there's a liberating quality. And so what I want for kids is not to escape, it's not to be distracted, it's to open the imagination and learn that muscle is something that they have and that they can use to ask questions. It's that old bumper sticker, question authority. And if you could nail it down to something really simple, it's that the work of becoming an inquisitive, inquiring mind naturally will question authority. And this is, if there's a political and social intent, that's what it's about.
May all the children hear your stories.
Well, from your lips to anyway.
Yes.
But I think that there's so many stories and so many great storytellers. A lot of them are happening on mini screens and stuff. But there's something different about being live.
Yes, but I also think your intent, so well stated, is crucial to this challenging world that these young people are growing up in. David, I know the beginning of one piece of yours, the 37 Practices of a Bodhisattva, and a little bit of its path towards development. But is there a particular piece that you would like to talk about and take us through the stages of development? This is so interesting to me because you really take it from concept or idea or germ and you end up on stage with all kinds of accoutrements. And please tell us about that. How does it go?
Well, yeah, I mean, each of these shows, and I guess I've written 15 or 20, has its own genesis, its own biography, really. The last big piece I did for kids is called The Boy Who Could Sing Pictures. And that started many, many years ago, where I was in a school somewhere, and I was having a break, and I went to the school library, and I just pulled a book off the shelf, and it was The Boy Who Could Sing Pictures. Well, I like to sing. I like pictures. What is it? And it's this remarkable story by Seymour Leichman, who passed away quite a few years ago. But I always kept it in the back of my mind. And then I started telling it to kids at schools and stuff. But then I put it away for a long time. With the election of he whose name must never be mentioned, I felt like it was critical to create some work that took a stand for truth in a very overt way. And I remembered that book because in that story, the protagonist, the boy, discovers that he has the ability or the gift to, when he sings, pictures appear. But he could only sing the truth.
Oh, wonderful.
And it leads him into this incredible adventure, including a confrontation with the fascistic powers that be, that have usurped the beauty and integrity and control of this kingdom. And it brings him to his knees. I mean, it's really like a nail biter. But he saves the day when he stays true to his gift. I thought, okay, this is the time for The Boy Who Could Sing Pictures. So I dusted it off. The miracle came when, what's going to be the music? Because I love to bring music into this. And I remember I was driving on the thruway. I'm thinking, what's the music? What's the music? What's the music? And out of the recesses, the deep, forgotten folds of my brain, came this piece of music, which is the beautiful Villalobos, Heitor Villalobos song. I'm forgetting the actual title right now. I think it's Preludio. I can't remember the title of it. But I had Spotify, Bluetooth, and the music plays. And I'm like, I see the story. I feel the heart and soul of the story in this music. It's Brasilianas Baquianas. Baquianas Brasileiras, number 5. It's his interpretations of Bach with a Brazilian vibe. Yeah, Baquianas Brasileiras, number 5. Gorgeous. And I thought, story, music, okay. And I downloaded it and I started listening to the story. How could that music fit in here? And I called my collaborator, my musical director, Daniel Kelly. Daniel, we got to get together. I just got this idea. Meanwhile, I call some theaters that I know. Hey, can we do a workshop in your space this month? How about we need one in there? And I start working. I need to get space. I need energy. Get Daniel. Anyway, it took about 18 months of writing, rehearsing, bringing in, brought in my director, Leonard Petit, lighting designers, video designers, working, taking, moving away, processing, churning it through this collaborative process until some venues agreed to like take a dare and take a chance with it and give us an audience. And there it came to be. One of the great things about this was this intuition that when the boy sings, we ended up killing all the video except for one tiny moment. But there's one moment when the boy sings for the first time. All the music has been in 2D. That is, Daniel is playing and we have these tracks from the computer, but it's coming from the stage to the kids. But when the boy sings, I recorded this beautiful singer, Daniela Bonauto, soprano who mimics a boy's voice. We separate it and we put her voice in three-dimensional surround sound. So there are speakers the kids don't see all around the theater. And so when he sings, it goes from 2D into 3D, and the melody arcs and swirls. And the first time it actually worked, tears fell from my eyes because it was a dream that came to be.
So that might take us to a more ineffable place, which is the relationship between your spiritual practice of meditation and your professional practice of theater making. And how about telling us, if you don't mind, when you first were drawn to meditation practice, and then something about how it's affected your work. So there's maybe a David Gonzalez pre-meditation, and a David Gonzalez as performer post-meditation. What does that look like?
Wow. Well, it's been a bumpy road. I read Siddhartha, Herman Hesse, when I was 13 or 14 years old, and I was like, oh, I'm really intrigued by this, but I don't really know what's going on here. And then I started practicing yoga when I was a teenager, and it was in this sort of ecstatic Hindu tradition, and I was always reaching for ecstasy. And I never got there. I just felt like inept. And so I had a very, let's just say, mismatched idea of what meditation was through a large part of my life. And it wasn't until about 10 years ago, when I went through a great deal of personal trauma and suffering, that I, quite by accident, stumbled upon a book by Pema Chodron called When Things Fall Apart, and my life was really falling apart. And it was like an invitation to be honest about groundlessness and transitoriness and impermanence and compassion. Compassion for self and to see that in others. So I became like, it was a wonderful experience. I was on a retreat and I found this book and I think I read it 3 times in a week. The whole thing. It was like I had been starved for this kind of mature wisdom. And really available. There was nothing to believe in. There's no metaphysic. There's no higher. It's all here. And so then I began to practice sitting meditation in a whole other way.
I'd like to interrupt you to say that, I don't know if you know this, but I have recorded or been the voice reading 5 books of Pema Chodron.
Oh my goodness.
Including that one, so that's a very nice connection.
Well, now I'm going to go get the audio book with you.
So from Shambhala Publications.
Thank you.
Yes, so please now take us to that.
Yeah, so, thank
change.
you, Joanna. So there's this intersection, and you as a writer and a performer, it's moment by moment awareness. Not being in front of it, not being behind it, not being outside of it. So perhaps it's clearest when I'm playing in a way, that each tone is like a meditation bell. If you take it, really stretch it over time, the awareness it takes to sit with each single tone that's played and to bring presence and awareness to that and let it have its life. It's that kind of thing. Allowing the moment to be what it is. Giving to it and allowing it to be what it is. And not pushing it forward in time, not forgetting about it, just being with it. So there's a quality of listening for me and a quality of playing that has opened. I don't want to say stillness, because it's not about stillness, but there's a sense of just a deeper, more patient quality of listening and being with. When I'm on stage with my more gregarious self, I think that it's about a clearer thing, even letting go even more and more of the me, the character that's bringing it to life. Mm-hmm. To separate out to this sort of real, sort of attending to the beat by beat energy of it and letting go of the result, letting go of it.
Yes, because there is a danger in that of everything slowing down too much, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
It is a sense of, I've heard people talk or give classes who are meditation instructors, and the world just kind of goes to slow motion. And as a performer, you're very buoyant and dynamic. So that seems to me the challenge, or the interesting, is to that staying present and being able to have your great timing and your movement and your momentum.
But that's the discipline of craft. That's where you just work it and work it and work it, and you don't show it until you got flow and you can sit back in it. So it isn't just because you have the idea it's going to be there. That's what rehearsal is about. That's about the work of it, and you can bring the same attitude to the work of it as well. But finally, this is my temples are not buildings that I go to. This is a sacred space. I worship in silence. I worship in the natural world. I worship in art, and I worship in beauty. Those are the temples I live in. And each of them has their entry point. You don't just go. There's dues to be paid, sacrifices to be made in friendship, in art making, in entering into the natural world, and in sitting in silence. It's work. And be buoyant on stage. But, there's like a lot of work behind it,
David Gonzalez, it is my pleasure to sit with you in silence and in friendship and in conversation.
Thank you, Joanna. What a joy.
Thanks to Greenkill.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Greenkill.
David. Thank you, Greenkill. Adios.
Adios.